In the wake of one of New Zealand's darkest and deadliest days, important questions are mounting around the mass shooting that killed at least 50 people in attacks on 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch last Friday. The Australian-born suspect, who has been identified as Brenton Tarrant, appears to have been motivated by racial and religious hatred as outlined in his so-called manifesto. The suspect called himself a fascist and specifically mentioned European events, figures and ideas that inspired him. Although many around the world are asking how could this kind of violent attacks happen, others see it as just the latest in the growing number of violent crimes committed in the name of white nationalism. What's fueling this apparent rise of hate rhetoric and crimes? What role must world leaders play in stopping hate crimes and hate speech, but also in providing a safe space for people to talk about their fears and concerns peacefully? And what piece of the puzzle does social media represent? Joining me for the discussion in the Beijing studio is Professor Wang Huiyao, President of the Center for China and Globalization, Thom Brooks, Dean and Professor of Law and Government at Durham University of Durham Law School in the UK, and Christopher Chambers, Professor of Media Studies at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Professor Wang, let me go to you first. In the so-called manifesto, the suspect mentioned his admiration for the Norwegian far-right killer Anders Breivik, who murdered 77 people in a 2011 shooting and bombing incident, and the Nazi-era British fascist Oswald Mosley. He also said he started plotting his attack after he visited France in 2017 and witnessed the invasion of France by non-whites. Many have pointed to the rise in white nationalist rhetoric in the EU as a factor behind this attack. Do you agree?
No, I don't. I think that actually, I think he really worshipped the white supremacy, and also I think that he's growing up actually in a kind of, the internet, social media, and this kind of influence. Particularly, I think he's playing a lot of games. I read that he was, doing a lot of exercise on the, on the TVs, on the computers, or the games. So I think that influenced him as well. But also that I think the widespread of social media, like he was carried this alive. I read that there was 1.5 million posting of his on the Facebook, and it was, even though a lot of them hasn't been posted, but there was an attempt of that. So that really is an issue. But also I think the gun control is also an issue there. So, but more and more, I think the hatred, generated of this kind of white supremacy is really a bad. I think that we have to, curb that and really under control.
Okay, so basically you're saying it's a kind of a homegrown hatred, although fueled by the internet, which is open and you can get influence from all over the world, but you basically in your home country, you don't really have to go to another continent to be heavily influenced. Professor Brooks, what is your take on the same question?
Well, I think that there is some element of homegrown stuff here, but what is, I think, very disturbing is that you are seeing this rise of it being seen as more normal for some to talk and express white supremacist nationalist views around the world, and becoming violent, feeling support from key figures. The suspect in New Zealand, he mentions all the people that you raised. He also mentions his support for the white nationalism, as he sees it, of Donald Trump, and that things like this, having kind of key world leaders that seem to, or at least appear to many, to support this type of violent reaction, white supremacy, is one that is very disturbing, that gives a space and gives that extra kind of push to those to do things individually that they might not have done otherwise. It should be very disturbing. It's also worth noting the kind of odd ideology of going to a country from Australia, to Australia and New Zealand, countries that were not originally with white natives, going there and claiming in defense of kind of the original white supremacy of those countries. It's a really jaundiced, non-historical twisted ideology that, that many have, noted by your previous commentator, shared many times as a real worry.
Yeah. Professor Chambers, now that we mentioned the United States, I know that in the U.S. media there's a fierce debate as to whether there is a white nationalist movement or whether President Trump has been fueling this kind of sentiment. President Trump, of course, still refused to condemn this attack and come out and support the Muslim community in clear, defined terms. Mr. Chambers, what do you think is the driving factors behind this crime in New Zealand, and whether the situation in the United States have contributed to that?
Well, it has. I mean, you have the shooter himself, the murderer himself, saying that. You have many manifestos that have been put on social media in the United States where we've had a mass shooting almost every month in 2018. The last terrible ones have had manifestos where they've mentioned, the shooters have mentioned the president by name, including a member of our armed forces who was thwarted before he could do anything, who had amassed an arsenal that was would be unheard of in any other country that had gun control, and he specifically mentioned the president, which goes back to indeed some of the protests around Charlottesville, Virginia, where Nazis and Ku Klux Klan members marched to defend the statue of Robert E. Lee, who was a Confederate general in our Civil War, pro-slavery, and the president mentioned
Professor
that they
Chambers,
were, very fine people.
Professor Chambers, let me interrupt you here. Is it simply because President Trump touting this idea of being a proud nationalist, fueling this kind of sentiment, or there are other factors deeper in society that already provided a soil for this kind of sentiment to grow? I mean, I'm trying to, look for the true combination of factors behind the rise of such sentiment. Professor Chambers.
Well, I think what you have to understand is that the president did not plant these seeds. The president merely helps harvest them to drive up support. These are seeds that have been endemic to American soil for a long, long time. He is just one person in a long line of politicians who has tried to use this nationalist soil, if you will, to further his career.
All right. Mr. Wang here in the studio, you mentioned a very important aspect, which is the social media, and it's very disturbing to know that these attacks were live streamed for 17 minutes before they were taken offline, and that there are over 1 million different versions of this video circulating on the internet, and companies such as Facebook having difficulties trying to chase down all of them. So what should we do with the openness of the internet? Should people better monitor it? Should people have better technology to trace such content? Should people still guard the open and freeness of the internet until such things jump in front of us and with shocking effects?
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we need to really have an alarming system on the internet and social media. And so whenever it happens, it immediately stop those violent things. Second, I think we should really also curb on the internet those games, or the violent games, and also poisoning the youngsters. And I think when they grow up, they're influenced heavily by those bad kind of content things. And thirdly, I think we need really to have a really strict gun control on these things, so that there's not easy access for any people to get machine guns like that to really killing rapidly on people. And finally, I think we need to solve the fundamental problems. That I think economically, I think that the refugees, the migration, so we should have orderly economic migration rather than we have a lot of refugees. I think we should also calm down, any rhetoric on that. And also, I think the international organizations like United Nations and other international organizations should really help the people that are moving around orderly in the world, and countries should share the fair burden of that, and should also have, finally, we should have the right narrative on that to really talk about those things, not in a hatred, but in a friendly, peace-loving attitudes on that.
Yeah. Well, Professor Brooks, all of these things, I agree with Mr. Wang. I think it has to be a holistic approach, and yet it seems so multifaceted, so gigantic. Is it ever possible that the world's people can have such orderly and open discussions without throwing mud at each other, given the openness of the internet that you can literally go out there and say bad things and you won't even be scolded or spotted.
Well, certainly, and it's also the case, of course, you can go online and you can find like-minded folks and live in a bubble, never really engaging with others. So there's lots of opportunities that social media and other things open up. There's lots of problems that they do. I think it is. I think what this event has been, I think, particularly shameful for Facebook, for not just having this live streamed on their platform, showing the need for doing something. I think even the most libertarian of minded individuals would think that the allowing of this to happen in the first place, and then to the proliferation of clips of this on other people's Facebook pages or elsewhere on the internet, I think I think would be seen widespread as a widespread problem. So I think that's a real issue. There's certainly things to be done around multiculturalism, immigration concerns. These aren't kind of new issues. I think one thing that seems to be happening a lot more these days is that with the internet opening things up and allowing those bubbles to be created, that people can believe that there is these big invasions of refugees or anyone else coming to New Zealand, which isn't true, or to Australia, which isn't true, or to Britain or America, which isn't true, because that's the only information they get.
Yeah. Professor Chambers, do you have any possible solution to that huge problem concerning the bubbles, concerning the wall that we put in ourselves in the name of free internet age?
You had mentioned yourself that it has to be holistic, like Chinese medicine is holistic. It's got to be, you have to find the pressure points and relieve them. One of them is social media, particularly in the West, where Facebook's business model has been more, not less, and letting anything go. That has to stop. There has to be dialogue. Also, as you did mention, a safe place for dialogue about intercultural communication.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Wang Huiyao, Thom Brooks, and Christopher Chambers. And that's it for this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. You've got The Point.